Chris at Harman, what advice would you give this group?
Well, you know, it's a complex world we live in now, isn't it? You know, it's not as easy as it was 20 years ago when we turned on a volume switch to listen to an audio system. I think with the controls and all the integration that we have to do now, we have to kind of focusing on the experience the customer has, whether it's an audio or video experience, and being able to show them the benefits of that. It's not necessarily setting up a $70,000 synthesis system in a room. It could be as easy as, and demo facilities have certainly changed, but showing and demonstrating the difference that better audio makes in experience. If something is playing, whether it's music or a video, and it's pleasing to the ear, one tends to spend more time doing that. If it's an irritant, then it's all for naught, and it was a whole waste of money because the customer didn't get what they really wanted. I think having a demonstration to be able to show some different level of audio, even from or from a sound bar, maybe an inexpensive sound bar, to a better sound bar, or to a small audio system, goes a long way in showing value to a customer.
Chris, let me follow up, because you're unfortunately our token American in the room today.
My pleasure.
It is. And talented and well connected as you are, to what extent is the market from where you sit in North America dependent on a little more than the Netflix and the Amazon Prime? In fact, you know, as and when cable starts rolling out 4K content, but to what extent are you in your sector waiting on that sort of development?
We're not waiting. Don't wait. You know, experiences happen today.
Sure.
You know, and not tomorrow. I mean, we do know that you know, there's going to be more channels tomorrow than there was today, as there are more channels today than was a year ago. So, you know, I'm preparing for those as best you can to give the client some you know, comfort there. Is a good thing to do. And another point that you touched on is that what do people really listen to? I mean, you know, and people listen to, a lot of them listen to streaming. They have their Apple TV and they put up Netflix.
Sure.
And that's a great demo. You know, all the receivers that do 5.1 are doing Blu-rays. I mean, I don't watch a Blu-ray at home. I watch Apple TV and watch Netflix 90% of the time. So I have one of our very successful distributors in Mexico City, fairly new to the custom side of the business, was more mass market. They put in a synthesis system and they sold 4 systems their first year, which is pretty good. And one of the reasons that they did that was he did streaming audio, and he played trailers that were on Apple TV for his clients, and the clients saw that, and they initially, you know, connected to it. So they were able to sell immersive audio because, you know, they're going to want to have something that's ready for the future, yet something they can enjoy today with today's sources.
Good advice, good advice. Peter and Thomas, start with Thomas.
Sorry, thank you.
We've all mentioned, or it has been mentioned today, 4K Blu-ray coming down, probably in this next quarter from 1 or 2 suppliers. How important is that to this room?
Actually, I might let Peter comment on this one, but just also to step in on what you said, it is the same thing for video and for content. Not only the 4K content will be available and will be easy to play and easy to enjoy on 4K projectors, but today, even with normal, standard, Full HD content, normal Blu-ray, with the reality creation and the upscale capacities of the TVs or the projectors, it is very easy to enjoy almost native 4K quality with the standard Blu-ray. And the chance that we have as Sony, as also Peter said earlier, is because we are a big company, we have all these units, all the production units, Sony Picture as well, and when they capture moving 4K content and when they compress it to normal Blu-ray, we know exactly how they do to compress it. So for us as a company, it's very easy to know how to undo the compression and to use the same kind of algorithm to go from a normal Blu-ray back there to 4K, which make also one key strength for us as a company. Now, in terms of native 4K content, maybe Peter, I will let you
good idea. Peter,
comment on this one.
Thanks. Yeah, Chris, I mean, I think it's interesting you talked about MIPCOM earlier on, which for those of you who don't know what MIPCOM is, MIPCOM's an international content market, basically, where the world's content creators, the program executives, meet up in Cannes twice a year.
It's a tough place to meet up. I mean,
it's hard.
You know, they've really got
somebody has to do it, though, right?
Peter and I to get down there.
Yeah. So you get 15,000 or so people from around the world selling and buying content, striking co-production deals. And for the last 3 or 4 years, we've been down in MIPCOM with a 4K theatre. So we typically get a room probably about a third of the size of this one. We put a projector in there, and then for 3 days, the content creators from around the world come and screen their 4K programs, and they get a packed room. Really, we have standing room only, basically. And the trend that's changed over the past 2 or 3 years is at the beginning we had people who were coming with maybe one title. They said, look, we're very proud of this title, it's 4K, it's brand new, have a look at it, and you know, they then talk about how they made it. And then it's gone from that stage to the stage we had back in October, the last MIPCOM a few weeks ago, where companies were coming along and saying, actually, we're making, 100 hours of UHD content this year, or we're making 50 hours, or we've now got a catalogue of over 100 titles. So we've seen not just a technology change at MIPCOM, but we've also seen an increase in the volume of content that's being created, because everybody knows that without great content, and we've seen it here today and heard it as well, the technology means very little, and it's the volume and the way that people are embracing the technology to create this content, which is really one of the most encouraging things that we found about going down to MIP.
Yeah, I think that's true. The commitment from the production community, even the BBC, even ITV, we're not seeing it on screen, I'm afraid, but the commitment there, particularly for their high-end productions, to 4K and beyond. BBC Natural History Unit, for example, been producing in 5K and 6K for a couple of years, because it wants to protect its archive. It also wants to see the content on screen sooner than later, but it's looking to sell that content for cinema exploitation, for Blu-ray, for high-end exhibition use, particularly with things like Doctor Who and the Blue Planet type series. They're spending real money in capturing content. And to the best of your knowledge, Peter, what's coming across the post-production desks here in London currently in terms of 4K?
Well, I think it's, again, we had people from post-production in the sessions that we were running in Cannes, and there was one particular very high-profile post-production coming from London, saying there's a huge amount going across the desk in all kind of genre, whether that's feature film, drama, commercials, etc.
And a lot of those front cards that you saw in the very early start as to what you were doing, things like Marco Polo, produced, or it's not produced, but post-produced down in Wardour Street, Downton Abbey, Wardour Street, what else am I thinking of? Sherlock Holmes, post-produced in Wardour Street. So the material is now beginning to percolate through.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, as we said, the cameras, the post-production workflows are in place. It's true to say that at the moment, a lot of the 4K content that comes in primarily is being distributed as HD or on Blu-ray, for example, or streamed in HD. But it's starting now to increase in 4K as well, because as you've seen, the technology and the ability to portray, sound and vision is just getting better and better. Some of the pictures that we saw today here are just, 5-10 years ago, it was unthinkable that you could see anything like that. And, the forward-thinking content creation companies, they know about this. So if you can create the best quality that you can today, then whatever the display technology that's coming now and in the future, you're in a good position to be able to bring that off the shelf and remaster it for whatever's coming next. So it's a real positive trend.
But I'm also minded, Peter, of the Muse production that we showed a year or two back, of the Katy Perry that we showed, I think, back in the spring. Guys, you have never seen anything so beautiful in all your life. And I don't just mean Katy Perry. I mean, the whole production was simply stunning, and would more than help sell a system, I can tell you, in my view. Those are your speakers and your panelists. Any questions for them that have flowed from the day? We had some fascinating questions, or we had one certainly before from the last group. Lamp life on these two devices, which Thomas touched on. But any other questions that you'd like to ask these experts? Hand at the back. Yeah, okay. Come to you in a minute, Steve.
I was interested in the Arcos system. I didn't quite get a handle on it. Is it primarily for electronically altering the acoustics of a room, or what do you see as its primary function?
Its primary function is in calibrating JBL synthesis systems specifically, because it's one of the components of our entire system. And one of the things about it that's helps us is that we know the performance of the loudspeaker. You really can't do room correction unless you know what your loudspeaker is doing, because you don't want to correct the loudspeaker, you want to correct the room. But we've used it, some of our dealers have used our Arcos system with our S-Deck for other systems too. We certainly do it with Revel systems in our own group, and and other systems, but primarily for calibrating JBL synthesis systems.
So you put it in a room, calibrate it,
Yeah.
and take the Arcos system away.
Right. Well, once it's calibrated, once the room is calibrated, you don't need to be. It's not a user touchable thing. It's something that is calibrated. It's set, and unless the room changes, it doesn't have to be recalibrated. There's always things like recordings are different. One recording is different from another, and that's what tone controls are for, and they're very helpful for. Actually, if there's no standardization how recordings are made. They're all different. So their playback monitors are different, which causes the confusion in the industry. If someone plays something back that's overly bright, you need to turn the tone down. And most processors have the functionality to provide some tone playback. Certainly SDP75 has a couple of different curves you can actually put in presets for different types of music. So that's still there.
Is it sort of scalable? Could you use it for, say, a large hall?
Yeah, that's a good question. It was first used within Harman in the consumer world, outside of automotive, in JBL synthesis. But Pro has used it for calibrating commercial venues too. The Stapleton Arena in Los Angeles, I just know the U.S. examples, was calibrated with Arcos, and so was the Disney theater in L.A. The larger the hall, the less need there is for room EQ. And in most cinemas, actually, the system sounds better with the EQ turned off. I think we've all had that experience, because you can actually ruin the sound if it's done improperly. And some of the reasons for that is they're EQing a lot of high frequencies and trying to change the speaker. And in the low end, you have less problems in large halls because the wavelengths are long and the room is much larger, so you don't get these huge nodes in a room that you get in smaller rooms. So the smaller the room, the more you need EQ.
Thank you. Come to Steve, and I'll come back to you in a second. Steve.
As we've heard today, there's been big strides this year in standards, HDCP 2.2, 4K, 422, 420. All these things have been dependent on silicon and chip availability, and it's now coming through the pipeline. But I kind of worry that there's a significant fallout from all the early adopters who will suddenly find that systems that have been put in are not going to function when Sky roll out their box and we have 4K Blu-ray. So how should the industry cope with that fallout?
It's a good question, and it's a very valid question. I mean, any thoughts here from you guys at the sharp end?
I've got a thought from a non-tech perspective, and that's not to say I'm not techie, because I spent long enough in the industry to be techie enough. But I would say that cementing a really good maintenance and aftercare business within your business would be a really good way of I don't like the word future-proofing. I think future readiness is a little further away from the crystal ball. But I think I speak to a lot of people within the industry over here and in America who don't seem to have a particularly effective maintenance and aftercare. It goes in, it gets done, finished, the end. And then they're approached X time later with, what about these problems, what about this, this is coming on board, what am I going to do with all this kit? And I just think having that relationship with the customer on an ongoing basis through maintenance and aftercare, it keeps the customer posted with what's going on.
Sure.
We used to have sorry to use the car analogy again, but I think most of the people in the room have got a car and had experience of owning a car. If you buy a brand new car and don't look after it, take it in 4 years later and complain bitterly about the fact that it's not working properly, they'll probably tell it to go away because you've not looked after that car. And we did a similar thing with our business in that we set up a service plan with a booklet, a bit like a car. First time you see us will be 6 months in, and we turn up and we'll do the firmware upgrades, la 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 la. But at that point, we can also inform you a little bit about what's coming up in the future, and what you might want to consider doing. And I think if you just get onto a level playing field with a customer that way, then it opens up a far better relationship. You know, you're not suddenly dropping the bomb on them that this really expensive kit that they bought sometime not too long ago, you know, in their opinion, because that dreaded 16-year-old, and I'm sorry to say it, he is one of our.
He's twiddled the knobs. Yeah.
Well, yeah, he knows how to do everything. You know, and if the 16-year-old can tell you the first 4 layers of the OSI model, get out of there quickly, as quickly as you can. But yeah, having that relationship with the customer and just managing expectation with them, I think is really important.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Peter, anything you want to mention on hybrid log gamma?
I can do that.
Do you really want to know?
Well, the adoption, or the likely adoption, because this is not cut and dried but the likely adoption of hybrid log gamma as part of the future specification means that, if you like, tomorrow's 4K will actually be backward compatible to most receivers. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think in terms of the way the standards are developing, there are two techniques that are really talked about a lot in the professional industry as a way of getting the HDR pictures from the set, if you like, from the production environment to the home. One of those is standardized now by SMPTE. It's called ST2084, otherwise known as PQ, which is a method of taking the high dynamic range pictures and getting them to the home. And the other one that's a lot in debate is called hybrid log gamma, which is a system that's been jointly developed by NHK in Japan and the BBC. And that again has been evaluated by some of the early trials. We talked about the trial that we ran in the German football game earlier on. We had a look at the hybrid log gamma with the customer, and that system, the feedback that was heard from the customer was that the high dynamic range pictures were very good, but also the compatible replay on standard dynamic range screens was very impressive as well. So that's something you might hear about as you kind of read about the way that HDR is being rolled in. The standards are evolving, but the PQ, ST2084 and hybrid log gamma methods that you'd probably be hearing about if you delve deeply into the discussion.
So there is a potential, or there are solutions out there which the industry is very aware of. Will it solve the problems for every early adopter of a 4K set? Who knows? But certainly the broadcasters are very concerned about that and do not want to upset a market which may already be 1 million households here in the UK. For example.
Can I maybe just comment also?
Please, yeah.
Just also maybe to give you an example, when we launched 2 years ago the first native, 3 years ago the first native 4K projector, so the VW1000, at this time the HDCP 2.2 standard didn't exist. However, of course, every companies love early adopters. So what we have done when in 2014 HDCP 2.2 came out, so we launched, of course, a new projector, the VW1100 4K HDCP 2.2, but we also offer to all our customers who purchase initially during 2 years the VW1000 the possibility to upgrade to HDCP 2.2, because of course there would be nothing worse for them to not be able to enjoy any broadcast 4K content or 4K content at home when they spend 20,000 euros on a projector. So this is things that we try to do as a company, at least.
Yes, sir.
Sony have been at the forefront in introducing native 4K with the announcement by two other big brands, the 4K Blu-ray. What's Sony's stance? What's Sony introducing?
I think none of us here are working in the consumer space, so we can't make any comments about that, unfortunately.
Yes.
An audio question. Just going back to the presentation you gave, you showed two graphs. One of the JBL room, how do I describe this? The way you set up the EQ in the room, but it was very different to the one you showed for Dolby, and I wasn't sure if this was that the Dolby that they're using in the cinema?
Was it the two EQ curves?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one was, yeah, they're very different. The top one was the Dolby X curve, which is used in cinema. It's based on the SMPTE curve, which was they were trying to standardize curves in theatrical, in theaters. And SMPTE curve was kind of rolled off in the low and high frequencies. It really sounded dreadful. And then the new SMPTE X curve, the X curve has a extensive bass response down deep. But and they also do EQ across 20 to 20,000 hertz. I mean, the full bandwidth. And we found that it doesn't work. So we're kind of forward about this, I guess. But the curve that we've come up with, which has a lot to do with psychoacoustics that we've done and doing a lot of rooms, has an elevated bass in the low frequencies. And a lot of this information came from Dr. Floyd Toole's study. And Dr. Floyd Toole's one of the top acoustic scientists in the world. Him and his team were hired in the early 90s by Harman so that they could bring their expertise to doing measurements. And this is a lot of what they've found that got applied to our products. So our curve got elevated in the bass and slowly rolls off. There's some timbre wide bandwidth filters that are done to the high frequencies, but it's not full frequency response, and it has a higher bottom end than the X curve does.
Are you the only manufacturer, are you aware, that's going down this route, or are other companies have target curves that have an elevated bottom end. We did a study, but I think it's out of date, which is not in my presentation anymore, about 5 years ago. We did a study of different auto EQ algorithms from Odyssey and Steinway Lindorf and ourselves and No EQ and a bunch of them. And the synthesis EQ for multiple seats came out on top. And this was a double-blind test. It's just running the EQ and then having panels listen to speakers and picking A, B, and C, not knowing what it was. And then the single microphone, one seat came on top, the array came out second, and then the others were behind it. And some of those were below, most of them were below no EQ. And I don't want to talk about who they were because that was 5 years ago, and things might have changed. So, but we have improved our EQ too, and about 6 different improvements since that time. So our EQ is elevated as well.
Time for another one, if something. Yes, sir. Back at.
Question for Adrian. The new matrices that are coming through now. At the moment, the HD-based T stand, they're not supporting the full 444 color space. I've never done a demonstration. So let's say you've got one screen with the full color spacing, and then let's say the HD-based T with its 420. Is there? I mean, is there much difference? We're not kind of short-changing customers by not giving them.
When you go to that 60 frames, you're almost sort of 75% of the colour depth. So that is the constraint we have with the chipsets that we're all working to as manufacturers with HD-based T. That's the premium level. So I think it's when you're going to that sort of content when it becomes available at 60 frames, there is a depreciation in the colour depth overall. Have you got anything to add to that, really, Dave, in terms of?
Not really. I mean, that says it all. Really, it's it's the standard. 420 is the standard that's been ratified for a UHD Blu-ray, so it's not all that bad. No. Yeah. I think it'd be interesting to compare
content as and when it's available, because the only way you can get 444 content really now is specialised, computer-generated content, high-powered graphics cards and things. So there's nothing really consumer-facing that's available to compare right now.
I mean, we've got the 4x4, 6x6 HDMI versions that will deliver to that spec, but it's where you're going to have a longer distance where everyone's working to the same capability really at the moment.
In fairness, they're not really the kind of conversations we'd ever have with an end customer about quality.
Sure.
They're just going to, it's going to go, you're not going to want to hear about it. All they want to know really is you've got 4K distributed around the house.
Absolutely, yeah. But we're talking regularly to Valens HD-based T about what's the next stage of stepping that up to 444 level, and that's where fibre comes into play, or other solutions that Valens are working on may be able to get a spec that can deliver something on that footing, but there will be some compromise if it's on Cat 6. There's no doubt about that.
Gentlemen, thank you very, very much for your attention today. Please join me in thanking our panelists, our experts, for their input, their expertise, and their advice. Thank you, gentlemen.
Hey guys, thanks for watching our video. Click below to subscribe and be sure to follow XCII on Twitter, Facebook and Google+.